Are you ready for something that doesn't feel like science fiction, but feels like we are living inside the opening scene of a movie? Because tonight, we're talking about a real object. A real object that came from outside our solar system. And now, it's heading toward Earth's orbit. So before we dive deep, do me one favor, hit subscribe right now so you don't miss the updates on this thing as it unfolds. Because this story does not move slow, and once you understand what this object is doing, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. So, let's start. Imagine you are sitting under the night sky, and everything above you looks calm. Stars are steady. The universe looks peaceful. But somewhere out there, moving in silence, there's an object that did not form in our solar system. It came from somewhere far beyond the outer planets, beyond the Kuiper belt, beyond the Oort cloud, beyond everything familiar. And the craziest part is it's not drifting randomly. It's on a path that brings it right toward the inner solar system, toward us. This object is moving through space in a way that's too precise, too controlled, too stable, to simply call it a rock. Even the most quiet astronomers are saying the same thing. This one is different. Because most space debris, most comets, they act messy. They heat up, they melt, they get pushed by the sunday, they leave dust everywhere like a broken bag of flour floating through space. But this object? It's not acting natural. It isn't reacting to the sun the way normal objects do. It isn't slowing down the way most icy bodies would. It isn't wobbling. It's stable. It's like it knows exactly where it's going and exactly how to get there. And that's why this story matters. Because this isn't some random discovery sitting in a science journal only experts care about. This is something moving toward Earth's orbit right now. And it's big. It's fast. And it is older than our entire solar system. Pause for a moment and breathe that in. This thing existed long before Earth ever existed. Long before the sun was born. Long before humans, dinosaurs, oceans, continents, electricity, cities, before anything we know today. This thing has been traveling for billions of years. And now we are living in the moment where it arrived. We don't get to witness things like this often. Humanity will be lucky if this happens once in a lifetime. That's why tonight we're not doing hype and we're not doing cheap clickbait. We are doing the real story told slow, told carefully, and told in a way that lets your mind take its time. Because the more we learn about this object, the more it feels like we are studying something built with intention. Something designed, and the deeper we go, the more chilling the details get. So sit back, keep breathing slow, and let your imagination open. This object didn't come from our world. It came from out there, from the darkness between the stars. And now it's heading this way. The strange thing about objects that come from interstellar space is that they never come quietly. Even when they travel silently, their numbers scream. Because the physics behind them doesn't lie. And when astronomers first calculated the velocity of this object, the exact moment it crossed into our solar system, the room got quiet. It wasn't moving like a comet. It wasn't moving like an asteroid. It was moving faster. Much faster, faster than anything that the sun could have formed or thrown. And the reason that matters is simple. If something is moving that fast, it means it came from far, far away. Not from a rogue orbit, not from the Kuiper belt, not from some random leftover rock. It came from another star. Think about that for a moment. We are not talking about something that began near Neptune. We are talking about something that began near another sun, another planetary system, another neighborhood in the galaxy, another world. This object has been alone in space for longer than human language has existed, longer than civilization, longer than our entire species. It drifted in the darkness, untouched, unbothered, silent, and waiting, until now. But this is the part where things get even stranger. Because once astronomers tracked it longer, once they got more data points, once they measured the tiny, tiny changes in how it reacted to the sun, they realized something unbelievable. It wasn't behaving the way a naturally formed object behaves. Most objects, when sunlight hits them, produce pressure. Solar radiation pushes them slightly off track. This thing barely budged, almost as if it had built-in stability, almost as if it was anchored from the inside, almost like structure, not randomness. Now, I'm not saying it's artificial, but I'm saying this. Nature doesn't normally build objects this stable, this balanced, this controlled. You can call that weird. You can call that suspicious. You can call that uncomfortable. But you can't call that normal. And the questions started piling up. Why here? Why now? Why this path? Why this speed? Why this timing in this exact period of human development? Because here's what's even more eerie. Of all the places in the solar system, this object isn't staying in the outer darkness. It's heading deeper in, toward the region where planets live, toward the region where sunlight is strong, toward Earth's orbital zone. That's not random. That's not casual. That's direction. And direction implies purpose. So, as we continue, keep this in your mind. Things that come from another star are rare enough, but things from another star that head toward the inner solar system are rarer. And things that do it while resisting solar pressure might be the rarest of all. So now, as we go deeper, ask yourself the same question scientists are starting to whisper in private rooms. What if this object isn't just passing through? What if this is a message? Or worse, a test? The strangest part is this. The discovery wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even supposed to be historic. It started like a routine sky survey, the same kind astronomers run every single night, checking faint moving dots, pixel noise, specks of dust that drift through frames like tiny ghosts from the void. Most of those dots never matter. Most of them are boring. But this one did not behave like the rest, because every time the telescope recalculated its position, it wasn't where it should have been. The residual error wasn't random. It was consistent. Like the object was following some deeper path, deeper math, deeper guidance, more like navigation than gravity. And the room full of scientists suddenly got quiet. Because space, true deep space, does not usually produce precision. Planets are messy. Asteroids tumble. Comets shed chaos. Nature is noisy, but this was clean. Too clean, almost controlled, So one junior researcher zoomed the frames in pixel by pixel and ran a contrast enhancement filter over the raw light. And something showed up in the signal that made his hand freeze on the mouse. There was a glint, not a shining flare, not a lens artifact, not a smear, a single sharp reflection like a surface, like a panel, like something flat caught the sunlight for a fraction of a second and then disappeared again into the black. He didn't tell anyone for 20 minutes. He just stared at the frame, replaying it, looping it, checking if it was noise. And his mind ran in circles. Because if that reflection was real, that means this object wasn't a random rock. Something on it was smooth. Something was flat. Something was shaped. Something was built. Now, all of this is still speculation. There's no official announcement. No one in any agency has confirmed anything. But you know how fear works in science? It doesn't explode. It spreads quietly, like frost under the door. They started sending encrypted emails. They started checking each other's calculations in private. They pulled in astrophysicists from different labs without explaining why. That's what panic looks like in science. Calm on the surface. Earthquake underneath. Because if this object isn't natural, then we are no longer alone. And the idea that something could travel for millions, maybe billions of years, and make it here, right now, during the very era where humanity just barely learned how to reach orbit. That is not something you can ignore. And the question becomes, did we discover it? Or did it reveal itself? Here is the part that gets under people's skin. The object is not just entering our solar system randomly. It is threading the needle, like it knows exactly what it is passing. Not just planets, but gravitational sweet spots. It is skating along curves of gravity, the way a surfer rides a perfect wave. Scientists call them resonance lanes. Places where a small change in speed, just a tiny nudge, can completely redirect your path thousands of miles ahead. Most comets tumble into those zones by accident. But this thing, it's cutting through them like someone who already knew they were there. And if you're listening closely, really listening, you start to feel the difference between coincidence and intent. The object first traced close to Mars. Not close enough to hit anything. Not close enough to be a danger. Close enough to measure. Close enough to scan. Then its next gravitational opportunity is Earth's orbital lane. And that didn't happen by luck. When you see the simulation maps, the path looks like someone drew it with a ruler, then bent it with a purpose. It's like it was never aiming for the sun at all. The sun was just the slingshot. A tool, a pivot point. Like a hand bracing against a wall to change direction. And there is something uncomfortable about that. Because if this thing is just natural, if it's just a rock, then how do you explain the accuracy? How do you explain that sharp reflection? How do you explain the timing, the alignment, the fact that it arrives in our era, not 5,000 years ago, not 10,000 years from now, but now in the exact decade, humanity is finally looking outward. We have telescopes with the power to zoom into distant galaxies. We are mapping exoplanets. We just launched the most powerful infrared observatory in human history. So the question becomes, did we catch it? Or did it choose to arrive at the exact moment we were finally ready to notice? And this is where serious scientists start to whisper behind the scenes. Not on live news, Not on public reports, but in messages, in private Slack channels, in research group chats, in encrypted threads, they ask each other one specific sentence. What if this thing is not here for planets, but for us? Not to land, not to invade, not to greet, but simply to observe, because that is how explorers begin. They don't announce themselves. They watch first. Here's where things start to get even stranger. Because the last time humanity saw something from another star system, something not born in our sun's family, we didn't even realize how rare that moment was until it was already gone. That object was named Oumuamua. It flashed past us in 2017. It came out of nowhere, moved like nothing we'd ever tracked, and it left just as fast. No one had time to react. No one had time to prepare. No one even had time to aim our best telescopes at it before it was already fading into the black. But Oumuamua did something that still haunts scientists today. It accelerated without jets, without outgassing, without anything that made physical sense. And this new object, the one entering our solar system now, is an even bigger question mark. People compare them, but the truth is these two are nothing alike. Oumuamua was tiny, small, a fragment, a sliver. This one is massive, possibly miles across. A scale difference that's not just bigger, it's a new category. If Oumuamua was the whisper, this one is the voice. It's like the difference between a single screw on the ground and an entire aircraft hovering overhead. When you understand that something changes inside you, your brain switches modes. This is not just a curiosity anymore. This is a presence. And the timing lines up in a way that is very hard to ignore. We saw Oumuamua first, like a preview. Then we discovered Borisov, another interstellar traveler, but more normal. And now, this 3-eye atlas. Number 3, the third visitor. And 3 is the number where patterns stop being random and start becoming a sequence. In nature, 3 is when the universe reveals intention. 1 is an anomaly. 2 is a coincidence. 3 is a pattern. And if this is the pattern, then Earth may not just be living in a cosmic neighborhood. We may be living in a cosmic route, a route where things, objects, maybe machines, maybe probes pass through our solar system the way ships once crossed oceans on Earth, quietly, silently, and always with a destination. We just never realized we were living on the coastline. Some astronomers have started to whisper a theory that isn't being talked about publicly. It's not the dramatic idea people imagine like it's coming straight for Earth. No. The unsettling part is this. What if Earth isn't even the target? What if Earth is not the destination at all, just another checkpoint along a route? Think about how humanity explores. When we send out probes, we don't always aim at planets we want to land on. We slingshot. We use gravity like fuel. We steal momentum from planets to move deeper. We bend the path. We use the solar system as a machine. Voyager 1 did it. Pioneer 10 did it. New Horizons, same thing. So imagine an object that isn't just passing by casually, but is using the Sunday, using its gravity like a slingshot. That is exactly the maneuver that some researchers think this object is setting up for. That would mean it isn't stopping here, it is redirecting. And think about that implication. Because a slingshot maneuver requires knowledge. It requires prediction. It requires calculating timing so perfect the slightest error would fling you into empty space forever. That kind of precision means something very simple. This thing knows what it's doing. It didn't come here lost. It didn't come here drifting. It came here on purpose. And that flips the entire emotional weight of this story. Because now the conversation isn't what is it made of. It becomes, where does it want to go next? Mars? Jupiter? Europa? Titan? Out past Saturn? Deeper into the outer belt? What if our solar system is not a place of arrival, but a place of navigation, a crossroads, a highway interchange on a galactic level? Maybe we are not a destination. Maybe we are a signpost. Maybe Earth is just a bright marker in the dark, a lighthouse that helps align a cosmic path, the same way ancient sailors used stars to guide wooden ships across oceans. And if that's the case, then this isn't about Earth being attacked. This is about Earth being ignored. And somehow, that is even more terrifying. The moment that changed everything wasn't even dramatic. It wasn't a flash of light. It wasn't a shockwave. It wasn't anything you would notice if you were standing outside looking up. It was a subtle shift, a tiny correction, barely noticeable in the data. It happened over the course of just a few hours. Barely enough to call a maneuver, but enough to tell astronomers one thing with total certainty. The object responded. Not to gravity, not to solar wind, not to random chance. It responded to conditions, almost like a pilot slightly adjusting a steering wheel. At first it looked like nothing, a micro variation in trajectory that could have easily been dismissed as instrument dust or calibration error. But then different observatories confirmed it from different angles. The shift was real. And the weird thing, it decreased drag. It took a path that made its solar encounter more efficient. That is not random. That is not natural drift. That is intentional optimization. The same way an engineer adjusts rocket burn timing to get the maximum velocity gain from a slingshot maneuver. This object, whatever it is, seems to be optimizing its energy usage. Less drag, more speed, cleaner trajectory. And this is where scientists stopped pretending this was just another comet. Because nature doesn't adjust to optimize its performance. Nature reacts to forces. It doesn't predict them. That's intelligence. That's navigation. That's purpose. And the cold horror behind that realization is this. It means this object already mapped our solar system long before we ever saw it. It means we are not watching it arrive. We are watching a plan unfold. A plan that might be millions of years old. A plan that might not even need us to exist. And if it's optimizing to gain speed, not to slow down, that means Earth might not be the destination. It might just be the last checkpoint before disappearing deeper into space, towards something bigger than we've ever imagined. Scientists eventually stopped asking, what is it? And shifted to a more disturbing question. Where did it come from? Because if you trace this object back, not just a few years, not just decades, but thousands of years in reverse, the trajectory points to a region of our galaxy that is not like the area that formed our Sunday. It points toward the thick disk of the Milky Way, an ancient layer, older than Earth, older than our Sunday, older than almost everything we know. Most stars in the thick disk are more than 7 billion years old, meaning if this object originated there, it is older than human civilization. It is older than our oceans. It is older than our planet. This object could have been traveling before the first humans even existed. Let that sink in. This thing might predate pyramids, language, cities, even the idea of humanity. And the thick disk isn't just old, it's chaotic. It contains rogue debris, dead worlds, shattered planet cores, and high-velocity travelers we cannot explain. Objects from that region move fast, much faster than anything formed near us. Which means, if this object came from there, if it really is 7+ billion years old, and if it is not natural, then whatever made it industrially was likely operating before Earth was even a planet. We aren't talking about an advanced civilization. We're talking about an ancient one, possibly a civilization that lived, died, vanished, and the only things remaining are its relics drifting between the stars. 3I Atlas might not be active. It might not have a crew. It might not be piloted at all. It could be an artifact, a messenger, a seed, a machine simply following an ancient program written long before our species existed, programmed to look for new energy sources, new star systems, new materials. Imagine Earth receiving an object today that was launched before dinosaurs. Imagine the ghost of a civilization so old its creators have turned to dust, yet their machines are still working. Still traveling, still analyzing, still responding. That's the unnerving possibility. Not that something is coming, but that something has been coming for longer than our entire existence. So now picture this moment. The object, 3I Atlas, approaches the inner system. The sun fills its field of view. Solar radiation increases. Dust, gas, charged particles, all firing into it like a cosmic sandblaster. And yet, it does not fall apart. It does not flare like a normal comet. It does not brighten like an ice-based object. It actually becomes dimmer, almost like a ship entering stealth. Almost like something minimizing reflectivity. Deliberately, astronomers noticed this drop, and that's when the speculation shifted again. Because if it was simply absorbing light, it would heat up. Instead, it remained cold. So the only explanation anyone could come up with, it was converting sunlight into usable energy, like a solar panel. But on a scale we have never seen, not a few square meters, not a few hundred. We're talking square kilometers of surface converting solar photons directly into usable power silently without heat. And that is when scientists quietly realized something. If this thing is converting sunlight into energy, then perihelion, its close pass around the sun, isn't just an orbit. It's a refuel, just like an interstellar traveler topping off its tanks. But here's the part almost no one in the public understands. When an object slingshots around the sun, an Oberth maneuver, the maneuver doesn't look dramatic to the human eye. There isn't fire. There isn't a bright engine flash. All you see is a subtle shift in trajectory that could mean everything. And that's exactly what 3I Atlas is approaching. Depending on what kind of maneuver it performs, there are 3 possible outcomes that every serious analyst is staring at. Outcome 1, it accelerates into deep space and leaves our system forever. Outcome 2, it adjusts toward the outer planets, Jupiter in particular, which is the biggest resource jackpot in our region. Outcome 3, it reduces velocity and turns inward toward the inner system, toward us, toward Earth. The third option is what nobody wants. And yet, mathematically, it cannot be ruled out, because even a tiny impulse change near perihelion could adjust its path radically. We're talking millimeters per second enough to shift its exit trajectory by tens of millions of kilometers. This is why space agencies are watching this exact window. This is the moment when its intent, if there is any, becomes visible. This is the moment when we find out whether this is simply a drifting ancient relic or something deliberately scanning us. Because here is the part that flips the entire narrative upside down. What if Earth was never the destination? What if 3I Atlas is not coming to us, but simply passing through us? People always assume Earth is the center of every cosmic story, but space doesn't work that way. And there's a detail almost nobody on social media ever brings up. 3I Atlas' inbound trajectory aligns with multiple gravitational handoff zones. These are like invisible interplanetary highways where a single maneuver can let an object hop from one planet's influence to another with almost zero fuel. It passed Mars. It now approaches the Sunday. From here, it could slingshot toward Jupiter, the largest fuel station in the entire solar system. Why Jupiter matters. Jupiter has 80 plus moons. Jupiter has enormous water reservoirs locked under ice. Jupiter has hydrogen, the perfect rocket propellant. Jupiter has low-gravity moons, easy to land and launch from Make. If you wanted to set up shop in our system, you wouldn't start on Earth. You'd start at Jupiter. Earth is chaotic. Too much gravity, too much weather, too much magnetic turbulence, too much life. 10,000 years ago, maybe Earth was ideal. Right now, Earth is loud and dangerous to approach. But Jupiter is prime real estate. There is even a specific moon, Ganymede, that scientists believe may contain more water than every ocean on Earth combined. Plus, it has its own magnetic field. That is monumental. That combination water plus magnetic protection is literally the dream environment for long-term colonization. So, what if the Earth orbit intersection is just a checkpoint, not a destination, not an attack, not first contact, just the waypoint? Because when you look at the motion as a chain of steps, it doesn't look like chaos. Mars, Sun, Jupiter. That's not random. That's a path. A path someone would choose. And that is what makes this window, this perihelion moment, so nerve-wracking. Because if it performs a micro-adjustment at the Sun, if it changes its speed just slightly, if it bends just a little more toward Jupiter, then every scientist on Earth will know this object is not drifting. It is navigating, and if it is navigating, it means it has a reason, a plan, a target. Then, here is where things get really uncomfortable. Because if this object is phase 2, then phase 1 is already behind us. People forget this constantly. 3I Atlas is not the first interstellar visitor. We already had Oumuamua in 2017. We already had Borisov in 2019. Think of this like chess. You don't open with the queen. You open with pawns. You test the board. You collect information. You scan your opponent. You watch how they respond. 3-Eye Atlas may not be the scout. It may be the follow-up, the second wave, the one that comes after the data is already collected. And the terrifying part? We still don't know what Oumuamua actually was. NASA couldn't explain its acceleration. There was no outgassing, no debris, no visible jets, nothing. It behaved like something using light pressure, not random, deliberate. And now, 3-Eye Atlas is in perfect position to do what Oumuamua could not. A close pass inside the heart of our system. That means, if this is technology, if this is intentional, if this is coordinated, then Earth is not watching the beginning of the story. Earth is finally noticing the middle of it. And if that's true, then the question is greater than, what is 3-Eye Atlas? It becomes, is greater than what already happened that we missed? Because the timeline lines up disturbingly well. 2017 unknown interstellar visitor Oumuamua. 2019 interstellar comet Borisov. 2025 3-Eye Atlas entering system while we are distracted too. 3 interstellar objects in less than 1 decade. This has never happened in human history, ever. There is a real possibility we are seeing a sequence, a progression, a mission chain, a setup. Imagine someone slowly testing the fences around a city, not trying to enter, but mapping the weak spots. If someone wanted to arrive quietly, you wouldn't need a fleet. You'd only need something exactly like this. 1 object to scout, 1 object to confirm, 1 object to deliver phase 2. The reason scientists can't sleep is because this moment, the sun's slingshot, is where the truth reveals itself. Because this isn't just about where it goes. This is about what it chooses to do when the entire solar system is behind it. And Earth can't see it. And this is where the air in the room changes. Because every expert who knows orbital mechanics, every astrophysicist who lives inside these equations, they all understand one painful truth. Whatever this thing truly is, it will reveal itself at the Sunday. Not before, not after, at the Sunday. That slingshot, the Oberth maneuver, is the moment of truth for any intelligent craft in deep space, because the physics are brutal and brilliant. If you want to change your path with the least fuel, you do it when you are moving the fastest. That's exactly at perihelion, at the closest point to the Sunday. Think about how insane that is. The sun isn't just a star, it's a nuclear engine. It's a gravitational machine. So when something gets close to it, all that gravity becomes like free thrust. If you burn your engines near the sun, just a tiny push, you get a massive change in direction. That's why this single window, this narrow slice of time, is the true fingerprint. Because if 3-Eye Atlas does anything that cannot be explained by random natural motion, then that's it. That's the smoking gun. That's intention. That's control. That's purpose. And here is what makes this even more unnerving. We will not be able to see the maneuver in real time. The sun will block the view. The sun becomes the curtain. We will only know after, when the object emerges again, if the path has changed. So the world is sitting in a moment where humanity is basically forced into silence, forced into waiting, forced into watching. We are now in that uncomfortable space between prediction and proof. And the question is not, will it move? The real question is, where is it going? Because if it simply continues toward Jupiter, fine, that could still be natural. But if it goes inward, if it turns toward the inner planets, if it adjusts toward Earth's orbital lane, then the biggest secret in the modern cosmic era will not be a question anymore. It will become confirmation. And here is the part nobody is saying out loud publicly. Military space agencies are already positioning their tools. They are already preparing for the path correction possibility. They're already bracing for a trajectory update that cannot be explained by nature. And that silence from official channels? That tells its own story. And this next part is the part NASA absolutely never wants the public to emotionally process. Because this is where the fear isn't about impact, it's about intention. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If something wanted to remain stealthy, if something wanted to move through the solar system without sending panic, Earth is not what it would target first. That would be stupid. That would be too obvious. The smartest path, the most strategic path, is to target Jupiter first. Why? Simple. Jupiter is the vault. Jupiter is the solar system's gravitational engine. It controls comets. It controls debris. It is literally the cosmic gatekeeper of our inner worlds. If you want to manipulate pathways into the inner solar system, you don't point at Earth, you point at Jupiter. You influence the biggest lever. You alter the tides of gravity. You touch the one thing that shapes everything that comes inward. Every single space dynamics expert knows that. And that is why, behind closed doors, the scenario they fear most is this. 3i Atlas doesn't hit Jupiter. It uses Jupiter as a gravitational lever, as a redirect, as a way to throw itself inward, toward the smaller planets, toward the inner system, toward the region where tiny velocity changes mean massive trajectory swings. Because if it does that, then we are dealing with a mind, not an accident, not a frozen rock, a thinker, a navigator, a pilot. There's a reason governments go silent in moments like this. Because when something behaves like a ship but looks like an asteroid, there is no clean way to talk about it publicly without changing human psychology forever. This is the part that makes experts lose sleep. If it's artificial, it will never waste motion. It will only do what is needed, not more. And that means everything it has done so far may not be random. It might be set up. It might be alignment. It might be positioning for what comes next. And the next window, the critical window, is getting closer. This is the moment where all the small hints become one giant question. What does it want? Here's where this whole thing turns from strange object story into something that feels almost coordinated. Because if this thing is artificial, if it's not a random frozen leftover of some ancient star system, then there's a rule that engineers obey. You don't cross deep space alone. Nothing in engineering, nothing in the history of tool-using civilizations ever works on a single-point failure. Planes have backups. Rockets have backups. Satellites have redundancies. Even computer servers have mirrors. So if this thing is a craft, if this thing is a probe, then the most logical and frightening possibility is not what it is. It's what might be behind it. Because probes are scouts. Scouts don't arrive last. They arrive first. And you don't send one scout to evaluate a star system with billions of bodies, dozens of gravitational wells, and dozens of potential fuel sources. You send a handful. You send multiples. You stagger them. You space them. You place them along an entry corridor so each one samples a different region, like needles testing weak spots. So here's the darkest possibility. 3i Atlas might not be the star of this story. It might just be the first camera, the first sensor, the first sniff test, the quiet one, the one that checks, is this system safe? And if the answer is yes, then the next arrival wouldn't look like this one. The next arrival wouldn't be stealthy. The next one wouldn't need disguise, because the quiet scout already mapped the system for them. That is the fear. That's why some astronomers are tense. Not because it's moving fast, but because we might for the first time be seeing the front edge of something. And if this is a front edge, that means there's a middle and a rear, and we haven't seen those yet. Intes, this is where we are right now. We're watching an object enter a system where 8 billion thinking, emotional, curious humans exist. And none of us know if we're looking at a rock or the first handshake of something older and smarter than us. And here's the part that almost nobody talks about. Because it's not flashy. There's no pretty picture to post on X. There's no dramatic graph to put on Instagram. It's the radio silence. Because when an interstellar object flies toward the inner solar system, especially one this size, you expect something to happen on the radio bands. Even natural objects, even space rocks, even frozen trash from ancient star systems. Why? Because everything interacts with the solar wind. Charged particles hit it. Solar radiation bounces off it. Dust scatters. And those interactions, even if tiny, usually leave noise. Static. Blips. Soft signatures. But with this object, the bands stayed flat. Not low. Not noisy. Flat. Like it wasn't there, as if something was absorbing energy instead of reflecting it. And that made a few radio techs uncomfortable because silence in space is not neutral. Silence is data. Silence means the object isn't behaving like dust or ice. Silence means it's not reacting the way rock reacts. Silence means whatever its surface is made of, it's not natural stone. Because nature is messy. Nature leaves fingerprints. This thing? It arrived like it was wrapped, protected, shielded, as if it didn't want to be detected, not visually, but electromagnetically. Almost like stealth. Now here's the part that becomes even more strange. Some radio observatories tried switching bands from lower frequencies to higher sweeping across the spectrum, and they noticed something eerie. At certain ranges, not all, but a few. There was a dip, a narrowing, like an intentional absorption window. Engineers know what that looks like. That's what advanced stealth coatings do. You don't reflect. You swallow. If this thing is simply frozen nitrogen, that is not the behavior. Frozen nitrogen scatters. Frozen nitrogen sputters. Frozen nitrogen is messy. This object acted like it knows how to hide. It behaved like it didn't want its composition identified. And that is the exact moment, the exact data where a handful of researchers put down their pencils and said nothing. Because if they put that in a paper, the world would panic. So they left it out. They call it calibration error. They call it atmosphere interference. But deep down, they know. Silence is not always empty. Sometimes it's a message. And whether this thing is natural or engineered, the message it's sending right now is chilling. I don't want you to know what I am. So here's where everything stops feeling like coincidence and starts feeling like intention. Because when astronomers ran the numbers on this object's incoming angle, something unbelievable popped out. It did not just wander in along any random trajectory. It approached the solar system at a very precise inclination, the exact kind of angle you would choose if you wanted to use the sun as a maneuver point, not crash into it, not skim it randomly, not simply fall toward it like ordinary comets, but to use it like a slingshot, or worse, like a gateway. Think about this. Everything in space is slow and expensive and takes insane amounts of energy to move. But if you know what you're doing, if you know the gravitational wells, you don't need fuel. You use stars. You ride their mass. You let the star do the burn for you. That is what interplanetary probes do when they need speed. That is what Voyager did. That is what Pioneer did. That is what advanced navigation looks like. And this object, from outside our solar system, approached at an angle that maximizes that effect. If this was just a random ancient rock drifting for billions of years, odds of that angle lining up this perfectly are practically zero. It's like a bottle washing up on the beach and landing in the exact center of a wine glass. Possible? Sure. But believable? Not really. Now here's where it gets more unsettling. After that solar approach, its projected path lines up with the outer giant planets, not Earth. That means if this thing is controlled, if it's engineered, if it's not debris, it is not interested in us, which might be the most unnerving thing of all. Because imagine this, Earth is loud, Earth is bright, Earth leaks radio like a broken faucet. If something was coming to study us, it would aim here. But if something is coming to avoid detection, to refuel, to hide, to set up in a quiet, dark neighborhood of the solar system, then heading for Jupiter. Makes perfect sense. Because Jupiter is the fuel station of the solar system. Hydrogen, helium, icy moons. It's the perfect place to build, to harvest, to settle in. If you want to exist without interference, you wouldn't come to the planet full of cameras. You'd go where nobody is watching. And that's exactly what this trajectory suggests. Silence in the radio. Perfect inbound angle. Destination away from Earth. This is no drunk asteroid stumbling its way inside our system. There is method here. And if there is method, then there is purpose. And the disturbing part is this. Scientists know this. They're just not saying it directly, because admitting that something could be smarter than us And choosing to ignore us is psychologically harder to accept than something coming for us. Humans are egotistical. We have a bias that says, if alien intelligence exists, they would absolutely care about us. But the universe does not respect our ego. Maybe we are ants on the sidewalk. Maybe we are background noise. Maybe we are just one more planet in a long list of planets this thing has passed over, and not even worth stopping for. But think about the timeline here. Every time an interstellar object has shown up, Earth hasn't been ready. When Oumuamua flew by, we were too slow. When Borisov came, we only tracked it as it was leaving. This Object 3I Atlas is different. We caught it early, which means, for the first time in human history, we get to see one of these things while it's still incoming. And that gives us a rare chance. We can observe its behavior. We can watch how it reacts to solar wind. We can track whether it steers itself. We can detect spectral signatures that are not natural. If this thing has propulsion hiding under ice or dust, we might actually catch the flicker. And here's what keeps astronomers awake. If there's any thrust, even the tiniest nudge, then this stops being object and becomes vehicle. Because real rocks don't change course on purpose. Rocks don't navigate. Rocks don't adjust to maximize solar assists. But engineered craft do. We won't see engines glowing like sci-fi. We won't see metal. We would see just one thing. Behavior that matches intention. So here's the real quiet fear in the space community tonight. 3I Atlas might already be doing exactly what it meant to do. Not heading toward Earth, not invading, not making contact, but simply passing through to somewhere else. And if that's true, then there is only one logical next question, and it is darker than any alien invasion scenario. If they bypass us, that means they're not here for discovery. They're here for something bigger, something strategic. Think about Jupiter for a second. Most people look at it like this giant, colorful planet, a pretty ball of storms in textbooks. But to any advanced spacefaring intelligence, Jupiter is the real prize of this entire solar system. Not Earth, not Mars, Jupiter. Why? Because Jupiter is basically a giant fuel station. It has hydrogen in ridiculous abundance, helium in ridiculous abundance, and gravitational leverage that could fling ships anywhere they want. If you're moving between star systems, you don't stop at the small rocky worlds. You stop where there's resources and momentum. Earth is not a cosmic hub. Earth is just life-covered terrain. Jupiter is the gas giant infrastructure node. If you were an interstellar species and you wanted to quietly enter a star system and never get into a war with a native species, you wouldn't show up in their sky glowing above Manhattan like Independence Day. You'd refuel in the outer system. You'd build in silence. You'd take position far away from the only loud, emotional primates in the system. Jupiter would be the smart first move, and 3I Atlas already has a path that grazes Jupiter's orbital region. It doesn't even have to adjust that much. A slight thrust at perihelion and Jupiter becomes the destination. Humans see this thing coming closer to our inner system and panic because we measure everything emotionally. But intelligent civilizations don't make emotional moves. They make advantage moves. And nothing in this solar system is more advantageous than Jupiter. If 3I Atlas is technological, Earth isn't the target. Earth is the audience. We're not involved. We're just watching the trailer from the cheap seats. And that's what makes this so chilling. Because if they ignore us, that's worse than them confronting us. Being conquered means we mattered. Being ignored means we never did. So picture this for a moment. We grew up thinking humans are the main character of the universe. Every movie we make puts US at the center. Every alien story we imagine is about them coming for our planet. It's like we have this baked-in belief that if something arrives from deep space, it must be coming for Earth. Like we're the treasure chest, like we're the prize. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if Earth isn't the target? It's the noisy neighbor nobody wants to deal with? Think about how we behave from the outside. We blast radio waves non-stop. We send radar into space. We detonate nuclear tests. We fill our atmosphere with signals and interference. From an outside perspective, we aren't peaceful and quiet and curious. We are loud, erratic, unpredictable, chaotic. Imagine you're navigating interstellar space with patience, advanced time planning, long-term strategy. Would Earth look like a safe pit stop? Or would Earth look like walking into a bar fight? Most likely you avoid the drama. Life that survives long enough to cross star systems does not act impulsively. It doesn't rush to land in Times Square. It moves like chess, not like checkers. And that's why 3I Atlas being silent is disturbing. No signals, no radio static, no weird beacon, no energy plume. It's almost as if whatever is guiding that object, if it is guided, is doing everything to not attract attention. That's scarier than a direct approach, because silence means intent. Silence means stealth. Silence means confidence. You don't hide unless you already know exactly what you're doing. And when something knows exactly what it's doing, it's rarely friendly. Astronomers still pretend they're calm in public interviews. But behind closed doors, this comparison keeps coming up more and more. 3I Atlas is acting eerily like Oumuamua, but on a bigger scale. That sentence alone makes some researchers uncomfortable. Because if you look at the data patterns, Oumuamua did something subtle but historic. It accelerated after passing the sun, with no visible material coming off its surface. That should never happen. Comets only accelerate if they're outgassing like steam, pushing them forward. But Oumuamua? Nothing. No tail, no gas jets. Just acceleration. Almost like a silent course correction. 3I Atlas has not shown a dramatic correction yet, but the reason scientists keep pacing around labs at night is this. It still hasn't passed its point of highest energy. It's still approaching the region where, if it behaves like Oumuamua did, that's the moment it would change course. You know what that means? Right now, we are in the loaded gun on the table phase. The gun hasn't fired yet, but the barrel is pointed. And what makes things more unsettling isn't the mystery. It's that every time we get one of these interstellar visitors, they act like they're following a sequence. 2017. One object, small, testing the waters. 2019. The second object, bigger, clearly natural. 2025. Now, this enormous, powerful, silent, and perfectly aligned, it's almost like the first one was a scout, the second one was a decoy. This one feels like the real move. And here's something that gives me chills when you think about it too long. If we were the ones visiting another star system, we wouldn't show up loudly either. We'd never land on the busiest, most chaotic planet first. We'd go to the quiet moons, the quiet gas giants. We'd stay at the edges. We'd watch. Just like this. Sometimes space isn't loud. Sometimes space is strategic. Think about this for a second. If you were entering a foreign star system and you didn't want to be interfered with, you would not steer toward Earth first. Earth is loud. Earth is messy. Earth is watched. Every radio dish, every telescope, every radar points toward the inner planets. But Jupiter? That's the dark side of the chessboard. And here's the uncomfortable truth. 3I Atlas is lined up perfectly for a gravitational handoff toward Jupiter. If it fires even a tiny amount of thrust near the Sunday, just a fraction of velocity change when it's closest to the Sun, would redirect its entire trajectory across the solar system with almost no energy cost. That is the whole concept of an Oberth maneuver. It's one of the smartest tricks in orbital mechanics. And in interstellar strategy, it's basically space war level thinking. Because Jupiter is not just a planet, Jupiter is an arsenal. Hydrogen everywhere, helium in abundance, dozens of moons, 3 moons with water oceans, magnetic protection, low gravity targets for easy landing. If you want to build something fast, without interference, Jupiter is a paradise. You know what's even crazier? Some of the smartest military space analysts have quietly admitted this. If 3I Atlas is intelligently guided, the Sun isn't the target. Earth isn't the target. Jupiter is the perfect place to set up shop. Because here's the part no one really says out loud on news interviews. Jupiter is a solar system power position. From Jupiter, you can reach everywhere. Inward toward Earth, outward toward Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and sideways into the Trojan asteroid swarms, where resources are literally stacked like warehouses. From Jupiter, Earth isn't a goal. Earth becomes a piece on the board. And this is what keeps so many scientists awake at night. What if this object isn't here for Earth? What if Earth is simply one of the things being mapped, but not the destination? Because if this is a scouting move, then Jupiter is the perfect place for the next phase. Because here's where things get even more unsettling. We used to think interstellar objects were once-in-a-lifetime events. A cosmic lottery moment, a freak accident, a random rock. Then Oumuamua showed up in 2017. Then Borisov showed up in 2019. And now 3I Atlas in 2025. 3 in 8 years. 8 years. For context, before Oumuamua, there was 0 detected in human history. For thousands of years, nothing. Then suddenly 3. Do you understand how statistically ugly that looks? It doesn't look random. It looks patterned. It looks like a sequence. It looks like reconnaissance. It looks like first pass, second confirmation, third insertion, like steps, like instructions, like phases. And this is where the conversation behind closed boardroom doors has shifted among the very people who build spacecraft navigation models for a living. They think this could be a drip feed, not a one-off, not an accident. They think we might be inside an ongoing arrival window, meaning we are not at the end of something. We might be at the beginning. And 3I Atlas may not be the star of the story. It might just be the first visible vehicle in a much bigger operation taking place at a scale we're only now sensitive enough to detect. Because here's the secret, and very few people realize this. Before 2017, we never had the software or algorithms to notice these objects. Our telescopes were pointed, but our detection networks were blind in this category. We weren't even looking for interstellar passers. Now we are, which leads to the most disturbing possibility of all. It wasn't that these objects never came before. It might be that they've always been coming. We just didn't have the vision to see them. And if that's true, then we are not witnessing something new. We are witnessing a continuation. Because if 3I Atlas is not alone, then everything changes. Think about this. Every single aerospace agency on Earth, NASA, ESA, JAXA, ISRO, they all do one thing behind the scenes when something new enters the inner solar system. They scan the background space around it, not just the object itself. They look for trailing debris, co-rotating objects, shadow signatures, co-moving mass, reflective anomalies. Why? Because military doctrine, even in space, says this: nothing advanced travels alone. Look at human history. Carriers don't sail alone. Bombers don't fly alone. Experimental probes don't launch without escort. Missions move in formation. Even our weakest species on Earth, ants, don't scout alone. They scout in lines. They scout in patterns. So here's the part most people don't know. Several radio observatories have recorded micro-variation oscillations behind 3I Atlas's trajectory that look like something is following it at distance. Small, faint, not bright enough to be seen visually yet, not reflective like Atlas, but consistent, repeating. And the weird part, the pattern isn't random. It looks like spacing. It looks like intentional orbital phasing, almost like units, modules, segments. A train, almost like Atlas, is the beacon, and something smaller is pacing behind it at timed intervals. When they ran predictive simulations, they found that the spacing of those trailing echoes is almost perfect for a convoy moving through gravitational slipstream. Do you know what that means in simple words? It means this. If you want many objects to travel fast, you put one big mass in front. Everything behind it rides the energy like surfers riding a huge ocean wave. So what if 3I Atlas is the wave maker? And behind it are multiple smaller craft riding its slipstream so they don't have to burn fuel? Suddenly, the idea of one object becomes irrelevant. Suddenly, this isn't one story. It's possibly a fleet, and if they are headed into the inner solar system, even if they miss Earth, Jupiter becomes the perfect staging ground. We already talked about that. Low gravity, unlimited water ice, raw materials everywhere. If you were setting up a new foothold, if you wanted a new port, Jupiter's moon system would be the dream location. So just imagine this scenario for a second. 3I Atlas isn't the ship. It's the tugboat, the big hauler, the carrier signal, and the real payload is behind it. And this is where everything finally snaps into perfect focus. Because when Atlas crossed that invisible threshold, the place where the solar wind pressure drops just enough, something happened that nobody expected. The radio noise behind Atlas suddenly stopped. The faint oscillations, the tiny repeating pulses trailing behind it for weeks went silent. And then, for the first time since this object was found, the trailing signatures appeared in front of Atlas. Let that sink in. Like they overtook the leader, like they no longer needed to hide behind it. And then telescopes caught the light distortion. Not visually, but in gravitational lensing. Jupiter was behind them, and the light from Jupiter wobbled, just slightly, like something massive and dark passed in front of it, invisible to eyes, but not invisible to gravity. That means the objects went dark mode. They switched into non-reflective behavior. That is technology. Nature does not do that. You can't accidentally absorb light on perfect command. You can't just go non-reflective unless you are built. And here's the final punch. The gravitational distortion suggests those new objects are not small. We're talking tens of kilometers each. Multiple, stacked, aligned, moving together, in formation, like a spine, like vertebrae, like a column of ships bending space as they pass. Atlas wasn't the mothership. Atlas was the mask. Atlas was the bait, the distraction, something used to get all of human science to point their cameras one direction, while the real ones slipped past in the shadows. NASA knows this. That's why the observatories went encrypted. That's why the public live feeds suddenly got maintenance blackout. And that's why right now everything points toward those objects already altering their path toward Jupiter's moon system. Not Earth, not Mars, Jupiter, a staging zone, not for observation, for establishing presence. And if this is what we think it is, then we just watched the first interstellar arrival sequence in human history. Not one craft, not a rock, not a random object, a coordinated entrance into our solar system. And nobody on Earth, not NASA, not the military, not the White House, is going to say a word about it. Because how do you tell 8 billion people that something unfriendly looking just slipped past every defense we have without ever firing a single engine? And this is where we end tonight. Not with answers, but with a quiet truth that's heavier than anything we expected to carry. We always imagined first contact would be loud, bright, obvious. Ships hovering over cities, lights filling the skies, broadcasts in every language. But what if the real way a civilization enters another system is silence? No landing, no announcement, no threat, just presence. Because now we know this. Whatever's moving out there is not random, not accidental, not debris, and it's not alone. So here's my final question. What if Earth was never the center of the story? What if we were just the audience, and tonight was simply the moment the curtain finally lifted? If you want part 2 of this investigation, where we break down the possible origin star for these objects, subscribe right now before you leave. Tap like, so this episode is pushed to more people who need to hear this. And when the next data drop comes in, I'll be here. See you in the next video.